Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I know I received a few signals already. We have Landis Wade, great author, numerous books with us today. And also, as he has mentioned, he is a self-recovering attorney, trial attorney. So we're also going to have Dr. Yamile Jana join us. I believe Yamile is here. And without further ado, we will get started, guys. Thank you so much for popping in again for another edition of the Free Gift Show. Well, Landis, if that wasn't enough, I'm not sure what was, but
Yes,
ominous music to
get going in the early morning here.
Yeah, well, we're sure to wake up. Yamile, how are you feeling today?
Doing really good. Had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm doing this from my mobile phone, so I do apologize. Landis, it is an honor to meet you. I am incredibly impressed by you. So this is going to be a delightful interview for us this morning. We are delighted to have you here in our show this morning. So thank you for making the time to meet with us today.
It is my pleasure. I thank both of you for spending time with me to talk about my new novel.
Absolutely. And I wanted to just open it right up. This is not your first go round at the rodeo. Could you tell us about some of the other books before we jump into this one, Landis?
Yeah, so I'm what you described as a recovering trial lawyer. I did that for 35 years and wanted to have a little creativity in my Act 3. And so I started writing stories and put them into books. And the first 3 books I wrote are part of what I call the Christmas Courtroom Trilogy. It's kind of a cross between My Cousin Vinny and Miracle on 34th Street. It's lawyers trying to defend people who think they work for Santa Claus. So a little bit of humor, a little bit of fun, a little bit of magic. Had a good time doing it. And then I started a podcast, and then I started writing this novel that we're talking about today.
Well, fantastic to see. And I know you also host your own podcast of several hundred episodes now, interviewing authors, I believe, in fact.
That's right. I got this idea that in my Act 3, I knew how to talk. I'd interviewed a bunch of witnesses over my career, and I've been to court many times. And I figured, well, how hard can it be to do a podcast? And of course, it's harder than you think. But in any event, I started interviewing authors because I wanted to learn. I mean, I'm constantly learning about this craft of writing. And I thought, what better way to learn than to read other authors' books and then talk to them about how they did what they did. And now I'm up to, we just released our 274th episode, and I've already pre-recorded some for January. And I'm just off to the races there. It's a lot of fun.
Amazing. Yeah. So you're getting ahead doing pre-recording.
Yeah, that's the only way I can really keep up, because with my writing and everything else, and as you know, putting on a show, I'm amazed at what y'all do with all the live back-to-backs and everything. You just did one this morning, you're doing one later, and you've got this one in between. But for me, I do suffer from being a recovering trial lawyer, which is detail, detail, detail. And I want to make sure that everything lines up. And so I do pre-record, and it's just a matter of getting information. Plus, I like to read the book, so I got to give myself some time to read the book before I do the interview.
Exactly. And Yamile, over to you.
I mean, the job of an attorney is to humanize people. And so I think the transition from writing, because attorneys do so much writing, and humanizing people, so the transition from being an attorney, which I know that you still do some work as an attorney. So from the transition from that into writing, I think was probably flawless for you. Was it that way for you? I mean, I'm imagining, just because you have done so much writing for over 35 years as a trial attorney.
Well, it's very interesting, because I have a number of authors who appear on the show who are attorneys, who were former attorneys, and I always ask the same question that you ask. And there are some common denominators between what a lawyer does and what a writer of fiction does. I mean, there's research, right? There's also planning and plotting and that kind of thing. And lawyering is about storytelling. I mean, when you go to court, you're trying to tell the story in the best possible way and keep people interested. The craft of writing a novel, a little bit challenging for lawyers, because a lot of times we plot a little bit. We're not as much about the emotion of it necessarily in our writing. Judges want briefs to be tight and concise. In a novel, that's 300 pages sometimes, right? So you've got to keep people interested. There's character development you got to think about. There's twists and turns. The great thing about being a novelist, when I was a lawyer, I had no control over what went on in the courtroom. As a novelist, I control everything. I mean, it's not going to happen on the page unless I say it's going to happen on the page. So that's a lot of fun. When I go into the my fictitious courtroom in my novels, I'm in control. I was never in control when I went into to the courtroom in real life.
Right. That's very interesting. I want to get to what readers are saying about Deadly Declarations, because it's very tantalizing. It's incredible. But before I do that, your accomplishments, Landis, are too many to mention. But I do want to mention a few, because as a trial attorney, you've been a trial attorney for over 35 years. You have been recognized in the best lawyers in America. You have been named elite business in North Carolina for multiple years. Other lawyers have ranked you at the highest level of professional excellence through a peer review rating system that has been considered the gold standard for over 130 years. And I know you published your first book when you were 58 years old, and you have, I think you have written 4 books, and you have, I think, one, there was a trilogy, the Christmas Courtroom trilogy. The first one was Christmas Heist. The second one was Legally Binding Christmas. And the third one was Christmas Redemption. Christmas Redemption won, of course, you won an award, because of course you win awards and everything. Christmas Redemption won an award, National Indie Excellence Award, and you got an honorable mention at the Reader's Favorite as a Reader's Favorite Award. Then a few years after you started writing, you launched your podcast. That, of course, won an award too, because wherever Landis Wade is Landis Wade earns an award, right? Is that the way it goes?
I need to hire you as my publicist. This is great publicity. You did that exactly how I asked you to do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's incredibly impressive. It's like Landis Wade breathes, he wins an award for breathing. Landis Wade walks in a room, he wins an award for walking in the room. It's absolutely incredibly impressive. And I think
this is awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I need to get this clip here. Thank you.
Landis, you need this clip.
And it's an inspiration, I will say, Landis, because for anyone who's listening, you started writing when you were 58. And I think there's a message in that for us that you're never too old to accomplish any dream. And there is a message that I actually have seen, because I have seen your work, and I have seen your interviews, your podcast, and through your through your writing as well. There is an underlying message of hope. There is an underlying, and I know you write about legal things, but yet there is an underlying message of hope and an underlying message of always believing. And I think that is a very powerful and inspiring message. And not only do you transmit your message through your words, but you also transmit it through the way that you carry your life. And it is rare to see. And I think in that is very powerful. So there is a message for those of our friends who are watching around the world that there is hope. It is never too late, and age is just a number, and we can accomplish anything at any age, and you can be excellent and win awards and everything like Wade, like Landis Wade.
Well, thank you very much for that. And you really have tapped into one of the things that I'm very thoughtful about, and that is this idea that you should believe in yourself, and you should always believe. And that was the theme of my first 3 books, and it carries over into this 4th novel, because we're dealing with this idea of aging and transitions. And people ask me all the time, well, am I too old to write a novel? Am I too old to start taking piano lessons? Am I too old to do this, that, or the other? No, you're never too old. I mean, just think how much older you'll be in 5 years if you don't start now. I mean, you might as well start now and give it a shot. And that's, I think I mentioned this in the afterword of my book here, the one that's coming out. And that is, I'm starting to think about life a little bit like authors think about the 3-act structure of a play or a novel. That is, act 1 is where you have the inciting incident. You come into the world kicking and screaming, right? And then you come of age. And then act 2 is what authors sometimes call the muddy middle. There's a lot going on. You're having adventures. You're running into conflicts and obstacles and twists and turns, and you're trying to overcome things, and you're meeting new people and so forth. And then in act 3, well, some people think of act 3, well, that's the end of my life. It's over. I'm going to retirement. No. Act 3 is where things ramp up. That's where the excitement is, right? And hopefully it'll be a long act 3 before the denouement hits us.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, with your track record here, it's I'm rooting for you, and I'm going to continue following your work because it is an inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I mean, and well, if you will allow me, I would like to read some of the reviews readers have given to Deadly Declarations before we move on to some questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's great. I appreciate that. I'm very appreciative of the early readers who did what we call blurbs in the book.
Yes. So some of the things readers are saying. I tried, Danny Romain Powell said, I tried to stop reading Deadly Declarations. I simply couldn't put it down. George Hovis said, you'll be turning pages so fast, you might just break the sound barrier. Wet Bubble said, the plot burst with danger, complications, and intrigue right until the last page. Clyde Edgerton said, delicious, funny, suspenseful. I'm dying to read this book, and it doesn't come out yet. And I'm like, where is the copy? Scott Seifert said, a page turner brimming with North Carolina history and fun. And Heather Bell Adams said, in Landis Wade's capable hands, what starts off as a challenge to a perplexing will becomes a heart-pounding race to discover the truth. Well, Landis Wade, you had me at hello.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So if we may, I don't know if Marty wants to go ahead with some questions or if I may go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think I know where the inspiration came from, but Landis, I'm the guy that has the special sheet of the crazy questions that they typically offer at Google during the Google and Apple interviews that everybody complains about. They say, gosh, they ask you the weirdest questions when you go into interview at Google. It's 160 per year annum job. And they asked me, so I'll just throw one at you. Landis, if you were a crayon in the box of crayons, what color would you be? And more important, why?
Okay, I didn't prepare for this, obviously, but I wore a red sweater, so I'm going to go with red.
Okay.
I just think that the color jumps out at you, and there's action involved in it. And if you're going to write a novel, you better have some action in it. And back to the earlier themes in my life, yeah, I want to stay active as I get as I age. And by the way, my Davison Wildcats, I played football in college. Their color was red too, so I'll go with that.
Okay, sounds good. I like the answer. Thank you so much. Dr. Rodriguez, any question for this prolific author who has written so many books, Landis Wade?
Well, absolutely. I know it takes a drive. I know it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. I want to know, when did you realize that you had that discipline at the beginning? When did you pick up on it?
Yeah, so one of the great things about going to Davison College and playing football and doing all that is you didn't have a whole lot of time to get into trouble because I was doing all those different things. And that discipline set in at an early stage. I kept it in my legal career. And fortunately, it's the kind of thing that authors need. They got to keep their rear end in the chair if they're going to write a novel. And you got to have that discipline. You got to show up even when the muse doesn't show up, right? I mean, you got to be there and start putting words on the page, even if they're crappy words. And then you come back later and fix them. So I think the discipline, that's one of the things of being a trial lawyer that really has helped me in writing novels is that training.
Great. One more question. So did you set aside, let's say, a particular amount of time per day? Because, you've got more than one book here.
Yeah. Well, there are two classifications of writers. Essentially, there are the pantsers, right, that kind of write by the seat of their pants. There are those that plan out everything. They're the plotters. And then in terms of getting it done, there are those people who, if you take the words of Julia Cameron, who, you must write every day, right? You get up early, you write whether you got anything to say or not. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not one of those writers because I've got a lot of other things I'm doing. I'm doing a podcast. I'm engaged in other activities. I do a little arbitration on the side. I'm more of I write in spurts. Like, for example, last December and into January, I knew I only had 25,000 words on this book here, and I needed to get it over 100,000. So I took about 3 weeks and went and just worked hard every day, a lot more, 8 or 10 hours a day, writing. And I came up with a pretty crappy first draft, but there was like 100 and some thousand words to work with at that point, and then set in the months and months.
Well, Landis, I have to interrupt you with the pretty good first draft, because Anne Lamott, her writings about shitty first drafts.
Right, exactly.
She's very famous. When I went to the Thomas Wolfe School of Creative Writing in Asheville, and I actually asked our professor, is it okay to use that kind of language or to reference her shitty first drafts? She said, well, Martin, it's the whole chapter is named after that. Of course it's okay. And but please go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. You've got to get the words down on the page. If you don't have the words on the page, there's nothing you can sculpt at that point. And really, a lot of authors say, and I've tended to agree with this over time, is writing is essentially rewriting. You're going to find the essence of your story when you start to rewrite it. You're going to start to lay in the themes. If you're writing a mystery, you're going to start laying in clues in different places that your brain wasn't able to process as you're getting the draft down on paper. And you're going to go back and do a little more character development, perhaps, because, a novel's got to be a lot of things to be successful. It's not just plot. It's also character. And so to answer your question about, sort of back to the discipline and the time that's involved, I don't do it like those who get up and write every day. I take my hat off to those who do. They get up every morning with their cup of coffee at 6:30 and they write from 6:30 to noon and whatever. I like to find my inspiration, and then, I can't let go once I do, and I just kind of stay with it, for a while.
What inspired you to write a novel that involves the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence?
Yeah, so Marty and I have got a colleague we know, Scott Seifert. He has written the nonfiction book on the first American Declaration of Independence. So you can get it in any stores, bookstores. And he is another lawyer, and he's written this great nonfiction book about the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. I was in the process of writing another book. I was writing a mystery. It was set in a retirement community, but the plot was different than what ended up in Deadly Declarations. I interviewed Scott for my podcast. This is a great, you meet people when you do other things, right? We meet each other on this show here. I met Scott through the podcast, interviewed him for the podcast about his nonfiction book, and just became intrigued by this story that I didn't know much about. I grew up in Charlotte. I didn't know a lot about the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's sort of, I talk about, it's history hiding in plain sight, right? And so once I heard that, I was about 30,000 words into it, but I said, I got to go back. I got to go back, and this is going to have to be the storyline. This is much more interesting than what I was doing. I kept it in I kept it in a retirement community. I kept the humor aspects of it. I kept the themes of aging and that kind of thing. And yet I set them on a different path. I set them on the path of trying to solve what nobody's been able to solve in 250 years. That is the mystery of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence.
Well, how about we read the overview about what Deadly Declarations is? Marty, you want to do that, or?
I actually was going to ask Landis, because he also was going to read a short snippet today from his book, and it was going to be a surprise chapter that nobody would know about.
Oh, fantastic.
So
okay.
It's wonderful. And he's also familiar with Audible books. I just got into that space. I've published 9 books now, but I did my first, audible.com audiobook. Was a whole brand new learning experience. And I think Landis is motivating towards that as well. So Landis, we turn the microphone over to you, sir.
All right. So did you want to hear the author's note, or did you want to hear a little chapter from the book? I can do either one. So,
can we do both if I feel greedy?
Sure,
it's the holidays and I'm feeling greedy.
All right, that's good. So we'll start with the author. This is what some publishers would say never put in the front of the book, but it's not a preface. So those who don't like prefaces or preludes or preambles or whatever, don't worry. This is an author's note, but I did stick it in the front of the book, and it's only one page, so it's just a couple of paragraphs. The Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence has been an enigma for close to 250 years. According to oral history, the Meck Dec was signed in the turbulent wake of British hostilities at Lexington and Concord, when prominent Mecklenburg County citizens and militia leaders met in the North Carolina backwoods of Charlotte, the town George Washington called a trifling place. And there, at a log courthouse, they debated their future allegiance to King George, and with their passions high and their principles firm, they declared their independence on May 20th, 1775, from the most powerful nation in the world, assuming all risk attendant to their lives and property earned by such a treasonable act. Historians have treated the Meck Dec with disdain, running the gamut from contempt to indifference. Many called it fake. Others borrowed the words of Thomas Jefferson and called it spurious. Unlike Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, signed 1 year later, there is no surviving Meck Dec document, and yet locals continue to celebrate the day, and the date, May 20th, 1775, remains on the North Carolina state flag and on the Mecklenburg County seal. Were the North Carolinians first in freedom, as one North Carolina state license plate says? Or was the Meck Dec nothing more than a fabrication to gain favor in the nation's revolutionary history? There is no dispute that a meeting was held at the log courthouse in Charlotte on May 20, 1775, and that a tavern owner named Captain Jack rode his horse 500 miles to deliver documents from that meeting to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. And there is no doubt that controversies followed: burned documents, missing documents, stolen documents, falsified documents. And yet, curiously, virtually identical phrases appeared in the MEC Dec and the Declaration of Independence, raising the question: if the MEC Dec did exist, who copied from whom? So that's the author's note. That's just sort of kind of piqued the interest before we get into the novel.
That's heavy.
It's excellent.
That's heavy.
Yeah, and I might add that before he reads that today, Mike, you were on that show with the one professor from King's College in London who I briefed yesterday, the Desmond Tudo show today. I briefed him, Dr. John Battersby, about our work at King's College through the Sons of the American Revolution and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, allowing for the first time in history that the Georgian Papers program to be created and studied every document, over 350,000 documents from the Georgian dynasty, which includes, of course, King George III, who was also reported may be the only repository or person left on earth that actually has a copy of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, which was signed in 1775, a year before it was signed in Philadelphia, where I'm from. So we're hopeful that this document is found as they're digitizing, scanning, and optical character recognition is being done on every document in the Georgian Papers program, there in the turret castle. And, we would be very lucky because it is going, after the fire here in North Carolina burned a lot of documents of historical significance. It'll be amazing if King George III produces the only surviving copy that was shipped to him. So that would be stunning. And they have been so nice there at King's College, let me tell you, to work with us. And we send a different doctor every year there in residency. And so they have just been so helpful and so nice. And this has just been an amazing odyssey to possibly get this help for Scott Seifert, my buddy, and also for Landis and his book. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, that this is occurring and going on.
Well, hopefully they'll find something. They haven't found anything yet. It's there's this the MEC Dec. Of course, the meeting did happen in May of 1775, and it happened as a result of what happened in Concord, Massachusetts, when the British marched out of Boston, and we have the shot heard around the world. And that we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have anything to get the word out, right? So it had to sort of percolate down south, and it finally made it to us in May of 1775, which caused them to ask 2 representatives from all the militia in the county area to come to this meeting at the courthouse where they debated what to do. And so, the real question is, what did they decide and how did they decide it and so forth? And there are lots that goes into the story, but it's just remarkable. There's this thing that developed over time. It's sort of this historical fight about who's going to claim the rights to the revolution. Is it going to be Virginia and Massachusetts, or are they going to give states further south, some role in that process? And the Virginians and the Massachusetts, they didn't like the fact that North Carolina might have been first in declaring independence. They just couldn't see how a bunch of backwoods frontiersmen from this place that only had about 1,000 people living in it at the time could possibly have the courage to declare independence from the most powerful nation in the world.
That's right.
And when that rider showed up to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, because I was born and raised there, so now living in Charlotte for so long, 14 years, when he showed up, people like Dr. Franklin asked him, "Are you out of your mind? What do you mean you're here with a declaration? We are not anywhere even close to declaring independence. We are actually very close to reconciliation. And you bunch of nuttos down in the Charlottetown or Charlottesburg, whatever it's called. You have declared independence from His Majesty. Okay. How about no? And so, when I was a little kid, I was 9 years old in 1975. Our big Italian mayor, Frank Rizzo, welcomed for the 200-year anniversary a rider who rode from Charlotte all the way back again to Philadelphia and back to Charlotte, the multi-hundred-mile journey. And so Frank was a big Italian guy, and he's standing there in front of the Continental Congress Independence Hall with another mayor from Charlotte who's very famous around here. His name was John Belk.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a huge store chain down here of department stores called Belk in the South. It's very famous down here. It's like going to Macy's, and so Frank says, "Hey, John, you move over here and you just stand next to me because they said he's coming in right now with the scroll at a full gallop." And John said, "Okay, I'll just be right here next to you, Frank. And this is exciting. This is really exciting." So it was amazing to see this 200-year anniversary journey occur. And Landis, I'd like to turn over your reading to you now, please.
Yeah, and just to comment on that real quickly is that, it's been celebrated for years and years. The 100th anniversary was celebrated in 1875. They had 4 presidents visited Charlotte in the 20th century to celebrate it, where hundreds of thousands of people came out to participate in the parades. But you're right, at that time when Captain Jack jumped on his horse, only a tavern owner would be stupid enough to take documents that could end up having him hung on the way if he was captured, and ride to Philadelphia. When he got there, we were still in negotiations with Britain. In fact, in the summer of 1775, they tendered something called the Olive Branch Petition, which essentially said something like, we really despise what the Parliament has been doing, but King George, you're a pretty good guy. Don't worry about it. The idea being we still want to curry favor with the king, but we want Parliament to change its tactics. Of course, we know that didn't work, right? And so we ended up in a full-blown revolution. So they weren't ready. It wasn't that they were cowards when Captain Jack showed up and he had this in his saddlebag. They just weren't ready at that time for what people in Mecklenburg were ready to do.
Absolutely. And I'm getting a signal from the booth, John, that we have to go. I'm sorry, Landis, to go to commercial. So when we come back, guys, we'll be right back in a second. We are going to hear from Landis. Please stand by. We will be right back after this short commercial break.
Hey, Chef out here. Want to tell you about my Amazon best-selling memoir cookbook, A Chef is Born, chock full of recipes, also ranked the 77th book of all time out of 99, according to the Book Authority.
It's a good book, but I'm a better chef than you. Yeah.
Did you ever miss someone who has passed away? Now there's Miss You Gram app, giving people a brand new way to tribute the lives of deceased loved ones, or simply remember tender memories. This exclusive app is a user-friendly social media platform, giving people everywhere a respectable and comfortable place to create private or public memoriams. Miss You Gram has additional features like chat rooms and links to deceased databases and inspirational quotes. Users can also comment and connect on public posts. Join us and keep memories alive forever. Everyone wants to be remembered. For more details and download on the Google Play or Apple App Store, visit miss-u-gram.com.
Join former White House chef Marty Mangello as he brings to life colorful stories about America's presidents and first families that have occupied 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest.
Is when screaming guests are lit on fire inside the White House. So I know that everyone's thinking like, what did he just say?
It's time to be informed and entertained with Inside the President's Cabinet. Visit the website today at www.insidethepresidentscabinet.com.
Did you know that at least half of the world's population still does not have access to essential health services? One of the biggest problems in developing countries is the lack of medical monitoring devices. We have a solution. Kipuwex. Kipuwex is an easily attachable, lightweight IOMT device which continuously measures all the clinically relevant biomarkers vital to the assessment of your health. Kipuwex uses smart algorithms to provide efficiently reliable measurements for healthcare professionals. The biomarkers can be monitored remotely, anywhere and at any time, with a mobile and web application. Kipuwex is not limited by physical infrastructure and is suitable for professional use and in the future for home users as well. A simple user interface will let you choose which biomarkers you want to view and displays them on easy-to-read graphs. We here at Kipuwex want to combat healthcare inequality and help millions of people around the world.
Well, guys, we are back again, and thank you so much for suffering through those commercials, but they do pay the bills. So thank you to all of our sponsors for making these broadcasts possible to reach the greater world, and for people to comment and send in a few comments, which we will be getting to. Make a comment. We have 2 more comments up on the slate to be answered by author Landis Wade, but we are going to ask Landis now to read a selected passage. This is a surprise, so we don't know what he's selected, but Landis, take it away.
Yeah, I should probably set it up just a minute so everybody knows sort of where we are. We're now in a courtroom scene in the book, but how we got here is this. We have a lawyer named Craig Travail. He's been booted out of his AmLaw 100 law firm at the age of 65. He finds himself in a retirement community. He thinks his life is over. He meets a couple of residents, one of whom is Harriet Josephine Keaton and also Yeager Alexander. And they both encourage him, after we find out in the opening chapters of the book that the man at the Indy resident community has died. They encourage him to take a case. And the case he takes is on behalf of the granddaughter of this man who has died. To put that in perspective, he's 96 years old. He wrote a best-selling book called An American Hoax, where he debunked the Meck Deck. It became a national bestseller, but he's working away right before his death on a manuscript called An American Truth. And when they find his body, that manuscript is missing, as are all his notes and so forth. And so they kind of go on this quest of what was he working on? Did he find out something about the Meck Deck? But in the process, he's a very rich man. He cut his only granddaughter out of his will, and he left his $50 million fortune to the most despised resident at the Independence retirement community. And so they encouraged him to take the case for the granddaughter and file a will contest to go to court to prove that the man is insane. He lacks testimony capacity. And they come up with this theory that, well, he really had no proof about the MEC deck. There are no documents that came to light. So obviously something's gone wrong in his brain here for him to think that now the MEC deck is real. And so they go about trying to prove in this lawsuit that the MEC deck is not real. And because it's not real, this man lacked testimony capacity, and therefore the will should be overturned. So we're now at a scene in the book. The lawyer who's representing Sue Ellen Parker, she's the most despised resident of the Indy. Her name is Crystal Marks. She works for Robert Elkin, who's the head of that law firm. He kicked Craig Travell out of the firm. He's not a good guy. He's an evildoer, as I like to say. But anyway, they put a witness on the stand. His name is Dr. Parton. He's the expert on the MEC deck, and this is the cross-examination. Craig Travell has already had his direct examination of the expert, put in all the information about why the MEC deck couldn't possibly be real. There are no surviving documents. It's all oral history. They found the Mecklenburg Resolves, which doesn't say independence, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the cross-examination of this particular expert. Word had gotten out about the $50 million will contest with ties to the MEC deck, bringing more spectators to the courtroom gallery after the morning break. Amanda Rogers, now she's the reporter who's reporting on this particular trial. Amanda Rogers was in her same spot. The bailiff brought the jury in, and Crystal Marks got right to work on Dr. Parton. Is there any question among historians that Captain Jack went on a 500-mile ride from Charlotte to Philadelphia in late May or early June 1775? Now remember, Crystal Marks is trying to prove that the MEC deck is real. None. The only question is, what did he carry in his saddlebags? Crystal Marks agreed that was a good point, and with the judge's permission, she had an assistant place a large map on an easel facing the jury. She asked Dr. Parton to come down and use the map to describe the route Captain Jack took. When he stepped down, Judge Hernandez and the bailiffs moved around so they could see. People in the courtroom moved too. Travell knew jurors loved visuals. Crystal Marks and Dr. Parton were going to breathe the famous ride of Captain Jack to life. Before you talk about the route, Dr. Parton, I'd like you to talk about Captain Jack, the person that he was. Dr. Parton laughed. He was a tavern owner, rough and tumble kind of guy, brave, eager to help, a backwoods patriot who fought in the Revolutionary War and lived to tell about it. The description made Travell think of Jaeger. And the condition of the ride? Rainy, rough, and perilous. If the British caught him, they would hang him, whether he was carrying the MEC deck, the Mecklenburg Resolves, or both. He rode to the town of Salisbury, North Carolina first, where they were holding court. Dr. Parton used the pointer Crystal Marks had given him to identify that stop on the 14 to 20-day route identified on the map by a dotted line. One of the public officials asked Captain Jack to read what he was carrying to the court, and when he did, two prominent lawyers in the courtroom declared it treasonous and sought to have Captain Jack detained. According to one witness, Captain Jack drew his pistols and threatened to kill the first man who would interrupt him, and he rode on, stopping next in Salem, North Carolina. And speaking of that next stop, are you aware of documents discovered in 1904 written by a Moravian merchant named Tragot Baggy that bear on the question before us today? Dr. Parton nodded his head. Tragot Baggy wrote what we call a historical sketch in German. It covered various events going on in the colonies, including Captain Jack's ride through Salem, and it offers circumstantial evidence in favor of the MEC deck story. How so? It said Mecklenburg County had declared itself free, F-R-E-Y, independent. Free meaning free in German? Yes. Why would he use the English word independent if the other words were in German? We can't know for sure. We assume he wanted to convey the word exactly how he saw it. Travell glanced at the jury. By their attention to the evidence, Crystal Marks had landed a blow against his argument that the MEC deck wasn't real. The document Captain Jack carried through Salem, as witnessed and interpreted by this historian, declared independence. Would the jury think someone crazy for believing in the MEC deck with this kind of evidence? All right, that's just a little section from the trial. And of course, Craig Travell comes back. He has his own points. I mean, the interesting thing about the MEC deck is that and Scott Seifert says this in his nonfiction book, which is very well done. It lays down the arguments on both sides. Is it really depends on what you want to believe. I mean, always believe, back to the theme earlier. If you want to believe in the MEC deck, there's plenty of good evidence out there. If you want to believe that the MEC deck didn't exist, there's plenty of good evidence out there. And if you believe in oral history and you think that's stronger than some of what might be left, and that stories can be passed down through oral history, then that's a good way to be a believer in the MEC deck, because it kept getting passed down year after year after year and all the celebrations that took place.
Yeah. And we have a question from our audience out there coming in via Facebook from Patty Frudenberg of New York. She says, do you keep all of your rough drafts and repurpose at later times?
So I use this program called Scrivener. If anybody has heard of that, it's a very affordable program you can download to either a Mac or a PC. It allows you to put your work in chapters and move your chapters around pretty easily. It does have this provision on it called snapshot. So as you're going through and writing your manuscript, you can take a snapshot of the draft and save it. I kind of did that as I went. I honestly haven't figured out how to go back and find what's there. I know it's there if I have to have it. But there's also this point in which in my writing, I have to move from Scrivener to Word, because I start then sharing it, with some early readers and with my editor. And I do save those drafts because there are some fun things sometimes to talk about. I mean, one example is I had a local mystery writer, Kathy Pickens. She was very helpful to me in looking at early reviews of the book. And in one of the drafts I had, when it was way too many words, it was like 115,000 words, I had this scene where I killed off the entire Indy Retirement book club. I mean, apparently they had all been involved in reviewing the professor's manuscript. And I thought, well, I'll drive up the tension a notch here. I'll start killing off members. And she said, look, Landis, you can't kill off everybody at the retirement community.
Yeah.
So we went back and we took out that chapter. It really wasn't necessary. It was fun to write, but it wasn't necessary. So to answer your question, yeah, I do save drafts, because you never know, there might be a good story in there. And it might also help you later, give you an idea for something else.
And what's your favorite chapter in this book, Deadly Declarations?
So that's interesting. The book opens with a letter from John Adams to Thomas Jefferson. Of course, I didn't write the letter, but I put.
I was waiting to see when you'd get to that.
Yeah, I really like that, because he calls this, and I'll just refer to as chapter 1, and the chapter is called Concealment. He starts out by saying, and by the way, for those who don't know it, but Thomas Jefferson and John Adams being the second president of the U.S. and Thomas Jefferson being the third, they engaged in a letter writing campaign for years. Even though they were political rivals and at times didn't really like each other, they stayed in constant communication. And interesting historical trivia, they also died on the same day, 50 years to the day after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But apart from that, John Adams wrote this letter to Thomas Jefferson where he says, "Dear Sir, may I enclose to you one of the greatest curiosities and one of the deepest mysteries that ever occurred to me. It is in the Essex Register of June 5th, 1819. It is entitled the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence." And then he says, and this is the interesting line, "How is it possible that this paper should have been concealed from me to this day?" As if to say, someone didn't want me to know about this, because had I known about it, I would have shouted it throughout the halls of Congress and gotten y'all off your rear ends, and we would have declared independence much sooner. And of course,
that's right.
Of course, so that's a favorite because it starts off the story. But then about four chapters in, I put Thomas Jefferson's response, in which he says that the MEC deck is spurious, and he calls it the apocryphal gospel. And so anyway, you have the people lined up on, you either lined up on Adams' side or Jefferson's side. And at one point in time, John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of plagiarism in a letter to a friend. He said, he had to have seen this in the time of it, and the words that are on the page, he's captured, so well. Now he kind of backed away from that a little bit later because he didn't want to get sued for slander, but
very true.
Yeah.
Is there a character in the book that holds a special place in your heart? And if so, why?
Yeah. So, anyone who's ever written a book knows that it's a magical process. You
Yeah.
you start out thinking you're going to write something, and then you get up from working for 3 or 4 hours, and you look down at the page, and you're like, "Where did that come from?" I'm not that good. I'm not that. I didn't know that. I didn't even know that. How did that get in my book here? And for me, I was looking to add some humor to the book, and I knew I wanted to write about a lawyer who was struggling with, transitions and retirement, because I had some of those struggles. I was thinking, and so I was thinking about these things, and I moved my parents into a retirement community. So I was thinking about living in retirement and that kind of thing. But I wanted to add some humor to the book. And so I dropped in Jaeger Alexander. He is 75 years old. He has had about every job known to man, but he doesn't really work hard. He's so likable, and he's so optimistic, and he's so convinced that he can solve any mystery or any conspiracy that it about drives the other characters nuts. And yet he has got this quality about him, this endearing quality that everyone who reads the book seems to like him, seems to talk about him, seems to want to. My sister said when she read an early draft, she said, "Now you need to change this, but don't change anything about Jaeger." And so Jaeger Alexander, he somewhat thinks he's related to the Alexanders. He's not. I mean, I don't think he is, but he's got this idea that he might be related to the Revolutionary War patriot who signed the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. And so, but he adds that sort of, whenever you have a mystery, you have suspense in it, you need those breathers throughout the novel. Yeah. And he adds those breathers with the humor. And also when things aren't going well, and they don't go well a lot in the book, things twist and turn for the good guys. He's there to sort of say, "Come on, Craig Trevail, step up, let's go. Stop acting like a tall building lawyer. Stop acting like you've been practicing law for years. There's a future here, son."
That would be absolutely right. And I also feel remiss if I don't mention, as an Italian American, that later on we saw John F. Kennedy showcase in his book that a lot of the comments and sentences were lifted from an Italian American doctor's writings about all men are therein of that created free and equal. And people have disputed that for years, but luckily for President Kennedy, he had the actual original letters, but they were in Italian. And when translated, it's the exact lines that President Jefferson would use, of course, in the Declaration of Independence. And so it has taken the better part of almost 200 some years to debunk where things really come from. And luckily, like I said, for Dr. Felipe Mazzei, Philip, luckily for him, they still had the original document to where they could go and do that. And then subsequently with new books that come out, people try to rip it apart, debunk it. I'll prove it's a fraud, this time. And they always go back to that. So hopefully we'll get lucky with King George III will be the savior of Charlotte. But I also feel it's important, Landis, to mention that I have a gold coin from 1975 that was issued in Charlotte for President Ford's visit, and it's in the museum here in the glass case.
Yeah, I think that like 30,000 people showed up for his visit.
Sure.
That may have been the day that the headlines of the Charlotte Observer said, "County declares independence."
Absolutely. And back to you, Dr. Yamile, because I know she had some excellent questions prepared.
Oh my God, I have so many questions for you. We could be here for days.
No, please.
Can you give us some insight into what makes Sue Ellen Parker tick?
Yeah, Sue Ellen Parker, although she's described as the most despised resident at the Indy, she's always conformed to society's norms, and she's always done very well. She's done well in school. She probably could have been, she was a political operative. She probably could have run for and been elected to office herself, but she's one of those stand by your man kind of women kind of person. And she actually supported her husband. She supported others, and she sort of was in the background, but very competent. And yet, like any Southerner, they've got opinions, right? And so she always has opinions about how things should be a certain way, and she was brought up a certain way, and this is how things should be. And yet her nemesis, which is Harriet Josephine Keaton, who is one of the three that try to solve this mystery, she is a totally opposite. She's more about the future. She's more playing in the dirt. She's more, she is competent as well. They were just, I described Sue Ellen Parker was president of the student body, whereas Josephine Keaton, she was president of the environmental club,
More progressive.
Yeah, a little more progressive probably, but there's some things about Sue Ellen I don't want to reveal about her too much because she has an arc in the story that becomes a surprise for most readers. Yeah.
So if you had to spend a day with Sue Ellen, where would you take her?
So Sue Ellen would be the kind of person you take out to a nice restaurant, probably a country club. She would probably want to be wined and dined. She probably want to go to something that's very traditional. Whereas Harriet Josephine Keaton, she'd probably try out the new restaurant in town, right?
Okay. So, if with what I know about you as I listen to your podcasts and interviews and your blogs and some of your writing, if you look back at your life, do you remember any point in your life when you realized that words have power to touch emotions, to make a meaningful impact in people's lives, to just have the power to make a positive impact? Was there any particular point in your life?
Maybe how I got lucky with my college application and ended up at Davidson College because it worked. I mean, the fact that I must have used the right words to get in. I certainly had help from others who wrote some nice words on my behalf. That's a little tongue in cheek there, but I'm very grateful for the fact that, I did have that opportunity to go to Davidson and experience that. But to your point about words having power, as a lawyer, what else do we have to work with besides words? I mean,
well, yeah,
and
not everyone uses them responsibly.
Exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, and I think that those who are, I think, thoughtful with how they use their words, both in their written word and in their spoken word, are the ones that are going to have the power to change minds and change lives.
Right. And I say this, Landis, because one of the things that I have noticed about you is your humanity. And it comes across in your podcast. You have a platform where you give other people the opportunity. It's a service. It's really a contribution where you give others the opportunity to talk about their work, what they have accomplished. It makes you very relatable. And there's a humility about you, not only a humanity, but a humility. And that will draw people to you because it's rare. And you notice it in interviews as well, that humanity. And when someone who has accomplished so much in their life like you reaches a stage where you have not only accomplished so much, but won so many awards, it is very rare to find that humanity and humility. And so that's why I ask you, because at that stage, people are very careless with their words, but you are not. And you retain your humility. And I think that's where people will find you so relatable and where people do and are so drawn. And so please accept that as a compliment.
It's very much, and I really appreciate that. I like to have a good time on the podcast. You notice when you've listened that I laugh a lot.
Yes.
We like to have a good time. I like to draw. And that's one way that I try to help authors become relaxed as well, because sometimes you get a little nervous when you come on and talk about your book. And so I try to get them comfortable, try to get them to relax. And then it's amazing what they'll open up and they'll start talking about their book and their lives and their writing. And it's great. You learn a lot. If you have a conversation like you're doing, y'all are really good at this too. I mean, you're doing it right now. You're having a conversation. I really appreciate it. You've thought ahead of time about what you want to ask. I really appreciate that. It's so much different than sometimes you'll see in the media where somebody shows up and they don't even know anything about, what the author's written or what they've done. And they say, well, just tell me about your book. They've got no clue, right? Well, you were prepared. I appreciate that. And so I try to do that too. I try to prepare, and yet I don't want it to be so stilted. I want it to be fun. I want it to be relatable. I want people to, maybe they don't necessarily like reading memoir. They don't like reading fantasy. I don't read, I read a lot now because I have so many different authors, and it's something I do that's broadening my horizon a little bit. It doesn't matter though, because there's always going to be an interesting story around that particular book or around that genre. And so that's what I try to do. I try to make it enjoyable for the guest and for the author.
Well, then you prepare. It's like a
Exactly.
deposition for you. You spend what, 10 hours?
Exactly. The questions aren't as pointed. I don't try to put them on as much of
But you do
a
prepare.
spot. I ask a little more open-ended question, but I do prepare. I do. I prepare. I prepare show notes. I prepare a little outline. Some thoughts I want to ask about, and think about the reading they're going to do. And
Sure.
because to your point, you could talk for days, but you've got to, but people don't have days, right? So they don't have that much time. And so it's important to be a little bit prepared so that you can keep them focused, just as y'all been prepared today. And I really appreciate it.
And one more thing, because there's something you said that I want to ask you about. I've heard you say, I can learn more about myself when I am writing than when I am thinking. I find that to be so true, and there's so much wisdom within those words. I don't know if you remember saying it, but I do.
Well, if whether I remember it or not, because I don't always remember what I say or what I write, but I love what you just said. I'm glad I said it at some point, because you're right. I do think better when I'm writing. It's I'd much rather write out, a thought and a response. It would come out a lot better. I wouldn't have as much of, well, I wish I'd have said this, or I wish I'd have said that, when I'm writing, because I discover things and I get it right when I write more so than when I talk. So.
Well, there's a lot of self-discovery through the process of writing that you wouldn't really be able to delve into through thinking.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of people journal, but, they find that very helpful. The process of journaling is a great way to discover things about yourself, or just to get it out. Sometimes you just put stuff on the page, it releases it from, your body, your psyche a little bit, and you can move on. And if it was something that was bothering you, put it on the page, and it might help you figure out, what that next step should be.
And have you found that through the process of writing your books? Has that been something?
I have. I learn something every time I write a book, and I talk about this a lot. I'm in a constant learning mode. I was thinking the other day about, if someone ever asked me to teach on craft, I'd be like, no, I'm not ready yet, because I still feel like I have too much to learn. There are too many better writers out there to teach me things. I'm always learning through what I'm doing. In fact, some of the things that ended up in this book were ideas picked up, talking to other authors. I was trying to figure out, remember I said it was like 120,000 words at some point. I got carried away on the history. This wasn't supposed to be a history book. It was supposed to be a novel. It's supposed to be moving, pacing. And so I had to figure out, well, how do I still provide the history, but shorten the book? And so I remember that one of my authors, who is a thriller writer, she would drop in different chapters in different places, maybe a newspaper article or a transcript, or, something that was on the radio, or something, these little segments that would provide historical information or information pertinent to the plot, but they wouldn't take a whole chapter. The characters wouldn't have to talk about it. So I did that in my book. I have the letters from John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. I have an anonymous letter. I have parts of the professor's manuscript that were discovered, that tell a little bit about, kind of tease things out over time. And I used that as a technique, and I wouldn't have learned that had I not read another author's work or talked to them about their book.
Well, guys,
through interviewing authors.
Yes.
I was going to say, guys, it's that time of the show for the free gift show. Landis, did you want to ship a book out when it comes out and it's finalized in the spring, or did you want me to ship the pre-advanced copy you sent here? Today's winner, I'm about ready to announce it. What would you prefer?
So, I heard earlier, I know it doesn't come out until April 5th, so I'm happy to let you send out the advanced copy. Just know that there are a couple of typos in the advanced copy, and I'll tell you one fun story is that's why you put out advanced reader copies, because the readers will see things despite all the times you've proofed it and read it that you didn't know existed.
That's right.
In fact, you'll find, and maybe we ought to send them this because they'll get a kick out of trying to find those little things. The one thing they'll probably find if they're paying close attention is the woman who wrote the anonymous letter is a person named Sally Stevenson. Well, later in the book, on one page, she became Sarah Stevenson. Now, I don't know how Sarah snuck in my novel, but we're going to get her out of it in the final version. But she's going to be in this advanced copy that you send out. And just know that this will be just for them. It's an advanced reader copy.
It's very special, in fact, to receive this.
And it's not, it's not for distribution. It's just, it's what the advanced readers get. And I'm happy to, have whoever wins it get a free look, an early look.
Well, there is
absolutely
beauty in imperfection.
Yeah.
Well, I am amazed even with like Dean Koontz and superstar multi-$100 million authors. You're reading their book, and the other day I had one. It's like, oh gosh, that's a mistake. And I was reading another. I was like, you've got to be kidding me! Another mistake in the same paragraph. This is the official copy.
I know
it happens, guys.
It happens. No matter. I wrote a blog post that's going to come out on my blog. I call it Wade Scripts next week, and it's about gremlins, the gremlins that invade your manuscripts. I mean, they are sneaky. They get in. I mean, no matter what you do, no matter how many proofers you hired, they're going to sneak back in there somehow and get in. So I have more empathy now for publishers and authors when I see in that finished product a typo. And the hardest ones, I mean, one we found the other day, we're going to have to fix. It was that they overheard something instead of overhead something.
Oh, gosh.
That is hard.
That's probably Grammarly's fault.
Yeah.
It likes to randomly catch stuff and
and so I'll just share that that is an advanced print copy of the book that will come out in stores on April 5th, and actually the ebook will come out March 1st. If you prefer to read on ebooks on a Kindle, it'll be available there, and I'll have pre-order information on my website, landiswade.com. So that kind of stuff. But I'm happy that you're going to be able to give this away, and someone's going to get to
today's winner from the comments. All the comments that were made is actually Ms. Patty Frudenberg of New York. So, Patty, congratulations.
Congratulations.
You're ready to check the mail. Thank you for making a comment. This show is open for any format, any discussion, anything. And we've had people, Landis, say, well, I don't have like a free book to ship to somebody, so I couldn't be on. It's like, you know what, man, I will go and get like a $25 Starbucks card and we'll ship that out. Don't freak. Because I was wondering how we're going to talk about pouring concrete. I'm like, it's cool. I'm watching them. My neighbor is pouring all types of concrete pads. And even though it's been cold, I mean, they've had a couple of nice days here. I think it's going to be 75 in Charlotte today. Dr. Regas, for today's parting shot, over to you.
Well, I this is like a perk, Mr. Wade, thank you for joining us. Doctor, as always, hello. And I love these segments, informal, and they get out there. And that's what it's all about, communications.
Absolutely. Thank you to all of our viewers, and thank you to Mr. Landis Wade. Thank you for joining us on the Presents Streaming Network.